Hello people, I am Fiona, the mother of a wonderful 2-year-old girl. This is the story of how I had to deal with an awful mother-in-law and save my daughter from her clutches. My story might anger a lot of you, but it will also help you if you face a similar situation. The only reason I am sharing this story is that I want to warn everyone to keep their family safe from crazy mothers-in-law. My story starts when I was pregnant with my daughter, Rose. I and my husband Stephen were an amazing couple and had little to no arguments. However, during my pregnancy we started fighting a lot. It was mainly due to his mother, Deborah. To be honest, I never really liked Deborah at all. She was a pretty self-absorbed woman and didn't care about anyone but herself. Stephen valued her because she is his mum. However, I was not close to her at all. The root cause of my problems with Stephen was due to his mother's nagging. Deborah ran a daycare in the next town from us. From what she has told us, it was a popular daycare and earned her lots of money, so she always thought that she knows better than me and our Obgyn. During the entire pregnancy, she kept berating me. She said, "You are doing everything wrong, Fiona. It just shows how little you know about having and raising a child. Thankfully, you have me to guide you through this. You know I am qualified and know better than you." "I am doing everything my Obgyn has instructed me, Deborah. I know you run a daycare, but that's not an excuse to criticize me for everything." "Don't be so cheeky with me. Most women would be happy to have such a mother-in-law like me. You are lucky to get free advice from a professional." "You just own a daycare, Deborah. It's not like you are a licensed doctor or anything. I and the baby are fine. You are overreacting to everything." "How dare you insult me like this? Stephen, you need to teach your wife some manners. It would benefit her to listen to me." "Fiona, Mum does have a lot of experience with kids. You should take her advice for yourself. It won't hurt to try her methods." I would have listened to her if she was an actual doctor. All she does is criticize everything I do, even if the doctor has recommended it. Stephen and I often fought about Deborah's unsolicited advice. She came over to our house very frequently to berate me. Deborah even managed to get some family members on her side. I simply ignored those people when they tried to pressure me into letting Deborah guide me. However, dealing with Stephen was not that easy. He often thought Deborah was right and her opinions needed to be valued. Deborah knew that Stephen had great respect for her profession. He had even given her money for some renovations when she needed it. However, we never went to or even saw her daycare in person. It was in the next town, and Deborah said she didn't like people visiting. Apparently, it was unprofessional. Still, she was always under the impression that our child would be put under her care. She always said, "I can't wait for you guys to have a baby. Finally, I will have someone of my own to take care of. It will be so exciting, just me and my little Rose." "It will be a long time before she can be put into your daycare, Deborah. You will have plenty of time." "Why will it take time? Since I am a professional, I will take care of Rose once she is born. You are not qualified or good enough to be her guardian." "Excuse me? Why do you think I will hand over my baby to you just like that? You might be a professional, but she is still my daughter. I will decide how to raise her." "Absolutely not. You have no experience and won't be a good mother to Rose. I doubt she will even be safe under your care. You don't even stay at home, so how do you think you will raise her?" "That's up to me to decide. I'm uncomfortable with you just assuming I will leave Rose in your care. I have plenty of other relatives around." "She is my blood and I have the full right to look after her. Don't you dare try to give other people her responsibility. She is just mine. When CPS finds you incapable, she will stay with me forever." I was very disturbed by Deborah's assumptions. She was not ready to listen to me at all. Not only did she berate me for no reason, but also threatened to take my child away. Her comment about the CPS also set me off. My mother abused me, and I had to be placed in foster care. I still had some major trauma from that. Naturally, it was even more painful to hear Deborah say that I will be a failure. After my daughter was born, Deborah doubled down with her demands of raising the child. She straight up said that when she showed up at the hospital, Deborah said, Oh, my baby is finally here. I can't wait to raise her. She will be perfect, like me. Stop talking about raising her. You are being disrespectful to me. She is my child and not yours to raise. Don't be so dramatic. You'll go back to work anyway. Then you will have no other option than to leave Rose with me. It is not set in stone, Deborah. For now, I'll be home with the baby. Stop trying to be a parent to my child.
Fiona, I know you are tired, but you need to watch your tone. You're being unnecessarily rude to my mum.
Stephen just looked at your wife. She's being so cruel to me. Do you really want to raise your daughter with this woman? I am more suited to be her mum.
Mum, you are upsetting my wife. We will talk about this later. For now, can you just concentrate on the baby, please?
I didn't like how Stephen told me I am being rude. It was Deborah who started with the insulting comments. However, I didn't confront him there. I waited till we went home from the hospital. Deborah was inviting herself over for a stay at the house. But I shut that down real quick and left her no room to argue. When we returned home, I said to Stephen, Stephen, I have already told you that I am uncomfortable leaving Rose with Deborah. You have just heard a couple of rude comments from Deborah.
Relax, Fiona. You're overreacting a little. She was just a little rude today. It wasn't that bad.
I have been hearing a lot more when you are not around. You know how I feel when someone constantly tells me I will fail as a mother.
I know how you feel, Fiona. I'll talk to my mum, but promise me you will try to be civil for Rose's sake. She needs to have a relationship with her grandma.
Don't worry, I won't cut off her access to Rose. Not until she does something awfully stupid. At that time, I had no idea just how reckless Deborah could be. I really wanted Rose to have her grandma, so I kept a relationship with Deborah. However, she never stopped pestering about leaving Rose in her care. For some reason, the very thought always made me uncomfortable. When Rose was a little over 2 years old, I decided to go back to work. I received a good offer and decided to take the job. Rose was growing up and we needed the extra money for her education. Stephen agreed that it would be best for me to take the job. However, we argued when Deborah insisted on taking Rose to her daycare. So now that you are off to work, Rose can finally stay with me. I will pick her up every morning at 9. No need to collect her from my daycare. I'll drop her off at the house as well. Wait a minute, Deborah. We haven't even told you anything about Rose being in your care. Well, you are going back to work and need a good daycare. I am family and the perfect person for this job. Who else would look after her? We will have a tour of all the daycares and then decide on one. You can give us your daycare address so that we can go check it out. Why do you need to check out my daycare? It will be perfect for you. I might not have fancy advertisements, but that doesn't mean you have to be suspicious of me.
Fiona, there is no need to visit her daycare. She is my mom. I'm sure she will take good care of Rose.
No, I am firm in my decision. We will tour all the daycares here and then decide. If Deborah wants us to consider her, she needs to allow us to go see her daycare. Well, Deborah never gave us the address. She was practically forcing us to let her take care of Rose while she also works at her daycare. No matter what I said, she didn't even want to give up the name of her daycare. That made me suspicious. Later, when I told Stephen about my doubts, he accused me of being dramatic and vain. His accusations really hurt, so I dropped the topic. However, I put my foot down and found a different daycare in our town. Stephen was also firm in his decision to name Deborah as our emergency contact at the new daycare. With everything set, I was ready to go back to work. I didn't want to tell Deborah my joining date because Stephen never told her about our new daycare arrangements. I understood his dilemma and tried my best to keep Deborah in the dark. However, my joy only lasted for about a month. Deborah showed up at the house one morning before I left for work. Stephen was already on his way, and I was getting ready to drop Rose at the daycare. Deborah stormed in and said, "What is this that I'm hearing about Rose being in a different daycare? I already told you I will be taking care of her." "Cut it out, Deborah. We never agreed to keep her at your daycare. You were the one who assumed this on your own. I and Stephen made the joint decision of putting Rose in this daycare. You are on their emergency contact list as well.
I don't care. My child will not go anywhere other than my place. You will pull her out of this horrible place and send her to mine. Absolutely not. She is happy where she is. We also trust this place and access to its security cameras. I know you won't allow those things. Of course I won't allow those. I am her grandma and I don't need you monitoring me. You may have put her in a different place, but it won't be for long. I will make sure of it. What is that supposed to mean? I will have my grandbaby under my care. Just wait and see. You can't keep me away from her. Deborah said that and left. However, I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew Deborah wasn't someone who threw around empty threats, so I was a little uncomfortable with our conversation. However, I took Rose to her daycare and went to work. I was having a hard time concentrating on work that day. My instincts said something was going to happen, and my instincts have always been right. When I went to Rose's daycare, she was nowhere to be found. Immediately I panicked and demanded to know who picked her up. Stephen was still at work, so there was no way he picked her up first. Besides, he would have told me if he had. That's when the daycare said that Deborah took her from daycare. She told them there was an emergency at home and Rose needed to be home immediately. I was seething with rage and called Deborah. To my utter horror, she wasn't picking up my calls at all. I must have called her at least 20 times before I started to panic. My instincts kicked in and I knew something was wrong, so without waiting any further, I called Stephen and said, "Stephen, Rose is missing from daycare. They are saying Deborah picked her up a long time ago. I tried to call her, but she isn't picking up." "What are you saying, Fiona? Neither of us told her to pick up Rose from daycare. What is going on?" "You have to do something, Stephen. Deborah lied to the daycare that we had an emergency. This is insane. We need to find them." "Did you try calling her? I'm sure she has a reasonable explanation." "Listen to me, Stephen. First of all, she lied to the daycare and took Rose without our consent. Secondly, I tried calling her multiple times in the last 30 minutes. She never picked up." "Oh my God, Fiona, don't worry. I'll come right now. I'll try to get in touch with her." Stephen reached me fairly soon. However, my worry even grew further when he said Deborah didn't answer his calls either. I was furious and super anxious at the same time. We didn't know where they had gone. After a while, I told Stephen that we need to go to the police. I couldn't wait any longer, so we promptly proceeded to the police station. We filed a report with the police and waited for them to find our daughter. I prayed that she was safe. In my mind, I was also seriously plotting my revenge against Deborah. She was going to pay for taking my kid. When the police tracked her phone to the neighbouring county, I knew I had my chance. I said, "So she took my child out of this town without my permission. That is insane. I think I know where she went. Deborah operates a daycare in that town. I'm sure she took my child there." "Okay then. All we need is the address of the daycare. We will go and bring them back immediately." "We don't know the address, officers. She never told us the name or address of the daycare." "I'm afraid she's not qualified to operate a daycare. She refused to give us a name. All the daycares in that town are owned by other people. I had looked them up previously." "All right, we will try to narrow down her location from the cell towers. We will also ask around to find out if anyone named Deborah has a daycare locally. Don't worry, we will find your child." The officers left while we stayed back at the police station. It was one of the worst moments of my life. I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. But I had to be strong. I needed to have my child back and make Deborah pay for her actions. Stephen did his best to calm me down while trying to keep his emotions under control. After many excruciating hours of waiting, the police officer was back. He said, "Your kid is safe with us, Fiona. But there have been more issues with your mother-in-law. We rescued 7 kids from her." "Oh my God, are you serious? She was looking after 7 kids? "Turns out she is running a daycare without proper documentation and license. We tracked her phone location and reached a rental apartment that she used as a daycare. She had no business running one, so we had to take her into custody." "But Mum always said she got her license. Hell, we even helped her with money to buy stuff for her daycare. This is insane." "She was lying to all of you. Thankfully, your wife notified us at the right time. Your mum will be facing legal issues." Stephen was dumbfounded by what his mother had done. He was relieved that we got our little girl back. However, the entire fiasco with Deborah was a shocking revelation to him. I was a little less surprised because I already knew her business was suspicious. I had shared my doubts about this before. Now Stephen realised that my doubts were pretty legit. He felt guilty that he got mad at my suspicions before. When we finally got home from the police station, Stephen said,
"I'm sorry for not taking you seriously, Fiona. I had no idea my mother was capable of something like this. To be honest, I was pretty scared when Rose went missing."
"I'm not mad at you, Stephen. She is your mum, and I know hearing everything was hard on you. I'm glad we got Rose back safe and sound, but what about now?"
"I guess Mum will be facing charges."
"My God, how did she think she could get away with it? I will never allow her near Rose again. Trust me, I am more than okay with going in no contact with Deborah, but she needs you to bail her out. Will you do it?"
"There is no way I am helping her ever again. I am ready to disown her. She could have put Rose in danger. She is on her own now."
I was relieved to hear that Stephen was in favour of cutting Deborah off from us. I was feeling sorry for the poor kids and their parents who trusted her with their children. Stephen was also pretty stressed about the backlash his family will get from the scandal. However, we were ready to tackle it together. We also decided to file a kidnapping report against Deborah for good. Deborah had to beg people to give her money for the bail. Her savings were very little because she liked to have a lavish life. She even begged us to help her out and withdraw the case. She was now being charged with 2 different criminal charges. The entire thing was a complete mess. The relatives of Stephen also started to cut contact with Deborah. They never really liked her and were afraid to have her around their family. Stephen had a hard time dealing with everything. On top of feeling guilty, he was also sad to lose his mother. It was a bad time for her and I decided to be supportive. Soon the courts came to a decision and Deborah received jail time along with fines. The judge also cut off her rights to see Rose and be around her without supervision. Since we had filed for a restraining order, the judge sanctioned that as well. At least for a year, Deborah won't be allowed anywhere near us. She cried and screamed like a banshee when the sentence was read. After the case was closed, life eventually went back to normal. Rose is living her best life as usual. She's too young to remember much about what happened with Deborah. I and Stephen have started therapy to make better communication with each other. So far, it has been working pretty well. Deborah is still in jail and we won't hear from her anytime soon. If she tried something again, she would be promptly put back in jail. Meanwhile, I am relieved we were able to cut her off and have her presence out of our lives.